Hi, this is Andrew Sears. I'm the president of City Vision University, and I'm here with Dan Doty, who is the retired executive director of City Union Mission in Kansas City. And I wanted to interview him on some practical realities of what it's like supporting and developing a board. So, Dan, you were at City Union Mission for how many years?
Well, it's been just over 40 years, but 28 as the executive director.
Okay. And tell me just a little bit about City Union Mission, like what sort of budget and how many staff do you guys have on a typical years?
Yeah, our staff is around 150 people, mostly full-time, but some part-time as well, a lot of volunteers, but the budget is right around 10 million, a cash budget anyway, gift in kind, additional to that, but right around 10 million.
Okay, great. Well, I want to jump in with some of what I think are the most challenging aspects about developing a board. And so let me just jump in with some of my questions. So one of the biggest challenges of having an effective board is the challenge of finding board members that are, one, values aligned with the organization, two, have influence needed to move the organization forward, and three, have time and motivation to effectively serve. How do you address that challenge? I know that you guys have gotten some of the most prominent people in Kansas City, but they're also, I guess, very strong evangelical Christians, and they're given time to help you. So how do you do that? That's a big challenge.
Yeah, it seems like for a long time, we weren't very intentional. And that's something that I worked with our board and the board president and the executive team for quite a long time, and I'm trying to emphasize the need to be more thoughtful in the process in selecting board members. We kidded around at times that most of our board were white men that were my age, and that was probably typical for a lot of years. Even for years, we didn't allow women on our board, and that has obviously been an important change since so many of our clients are women, and they add so much to the leadership of the mission. But we were just more intentional, looking for men or women who were from the business community. We really don't go after pastors. We primarily go after men and women who are active in the business community, and trying to be selective in the kinds of positions that they serve in, so that we don't all have just everyone looking alike. I think we have two attorneys right now, and we had a glut of engineers for a while, but that was okay too. We kidded about that. We kidded about having too many Baptists on our board for a while, and that was more kidding too. I go to a Bible church. I was always looking for men or women from a Bible church background. But just being intentional. I talked to a lot of pastors at times. We looked at our donor list to see if there were men and women who fit the category of being in business, who were donors to the mission too, who had a love for the people we serve. And when we were specifically looking for African American or Hispanic men or women, I would contact pastors of those churches and ask if they had anyone who had expressed interest in a ministry like the mission. And so we were just, the word intentional was something that we were really trying to practice in selecting board members.
So in terms of the sources of your board members, what portion are you getting from referrals from pastors? What portion are you getting from your donor list? And what portion are you getting from other sources? And if there's other sources, what are those other sources?
Yeah, the primary source is our board itself. So we have men and women on our board who, just when we have an opening in the board or are looking for a specific kind of business background, we'll ask our board. And again, being intentional, they know, hey, don't just look for another 60-year-old white male, but be intentional. We look at our client base, and we probably have 50-50 in a sense of black and white clients that we serve. And so we really want to be intentional and again, a high percentage of women in of our clientele. So we're really trying to be intentional about who we select. But most of the time, it's board members themselves who will be intentional in looking for someone that would fit what we're looking for on our board. But still, at times, I would talk to pastors too when we were just struggling, having someone that we were looking for.
So you'd say half to 3/4 came from referrals from other board members?
Probably 3/4, yeah.
Okay. And then maybe the other 25% from largely talking to pastors primarily.
Yeah, and even a few staff members would say, hey, this person in my church is the head of this business and has an interest in the mission. So, there's been some staff referrals too.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Yeah, that's helpful. So how do you develop the relationship before asking them to serve? Part of the challenge I've had, if you're a secular organization, it can be just business, right? A board member is just business, but inviting a board member into your ministry that you've been with for 40 years is kind of like, the word that is often used in Christian circles is yoke fellows, but it's not quite like marriage, but it's like this person's going to walk with me in a covenant relationship for a number of years. And if you invite someone that you don't trust into that, then there's really high risk, right? Because it's like marrying someone you don't, it's more like a temporary marriage, right? But you're gonna be with that person. So how do you develop the relationship? What I've learned is people who I know I can trust. A lot of my friends I can trust, but not always. So how do you develop the relationship and build trust? And how do you kind of manage a pipeline so that if you are trying to fill 5 board slots in a given year, you have a pipeline of maybe 20 people that you're developing towards that? Help me understand what that would look like.
Yeah, we go through a pretty, probably intense is the wrong word, but an interview process with potential board members. And usually I've taken the role of being one of the first contacts. Sometimes that's another board member who takes on that role. But for the most part, over the years, the board has given me that freedom, and I've appreciated that because it has allowed me to be careful and to ask the right questions. And the hardest times we've had with a couple of board members in the past that aren't with us anymore is they were referrals from another board member who was not a super strong Christian. He was a fairly new Christian. And so he referred a person to me. And so part of our interview process is we have an application. And, one of the questions, there are quite a few questions on it. But one of them is to explain how they came to know the Lord themselves. And, this person had kind of the typical answer that would come from maybe a non-evangelical background. And, I went to church all my life and, just nothing specific that would say when they came to actually know Jesus as Savior. And so it gave me an opportunity. I try to be careful and kind in my conversation, but I challenged this person quite a bit as to whether she had actually trusted Jesus as her Savior. She was a member of a church and all of those things. And we finally brought her on the board, but only after she had said, Dan, I struggled a little bit with some of your questions, but it really brought me to the place of having to to figure out whether I really was a born-again Christian. And so we've had a few things like that, but I guess, I just love to talk to people, and especially when we're bringing somebody on to the board. We don't have term limits right now, and haven't had for a long time. So, the only way to remove somebody from our board is by board action saying, hey, this person really doesn't fit where our ministry is. So we really have to be careful, and I've always been careful. We've made a few mistakes over the years, but just developing the connection through phone calls. We invite people to come for tours before they would show real interest in the board, just to make sure that they understood who we were and what we were all about.
Yeah. Now, if you have no term limits, what's the average tenure of your board members?
Well, it really varies. I mean, we have some that have been on the board. One of our attorneys that we just love like crazy. I mean, he's been here as long. He came right after I came to the mission, so he probably came in 1979 and 1980.
Okay.
And he's had, I think, 2 or 3 years that he hasn't been on the board, but he is so valuable and has so much knowledge of the mission, and being an attorney that just he's kept us on track in all kinds of ways. So, there are a few board members like that we've had for a long time, and others, and he's been happy to be on the board for all those years. But others come on for a term of 3 years, and they may say, I'll do one more term, and we really leave it up to them. There have been only a few that we've had to have the board say, hey, you haven't been to meetings for 6 months, and you really think this is a good fit for you. And we've never had any hard situations where people have fought us, but
Yeah.
we've had to say, hey, let's mutually agree that this isn't the best place for you to serve right now.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. And I imagine the reason why you don't have term limits, I mean, is I got my start in rescue ministry back in 92 or 3 as a summer intern with you all. And in my sense, City Union Mission, there's a spectrum in nonprofit organizations between how much is the organization on one hand like a business versus like a family. And you guys are much more in the family domain is my read. And I mean, there's a lot of aspects. That doesn't mean you don't operate efficiently like a business, but a lot of people, stay like is that part of why you don't have term limits? Is you want to have that, that value, so to speak?
Yeah, I think that's a lot of it. The board, it's been quite a few years since the board has talked about term limits, but the last time they talked about it, they just decided, no, we really want people to, it takes a few years, sometimes several years, for a board member to become comfortable and really feel like he knows about the ministry and can speak knowledgeably to others about the ministry. So
Yeah.
that's part of it, but just wanting people who are good board members to stay with us. And
Yeah.
and there's enough turnover as far as people who don't want to stay forever, that we get fresh board members with probably 2 or 3 a year. So
Yeah.
that keeps us fresh too.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's good. So tell me, what are the primary roles that your board plays, and how does it help advance your mission, and how do they help with fundraising?
Yeah, I'll tackle the fundraising piece first. Dennis Chapman, our director of development, he's been very excellent, and he's always challenging the board when he's been invited to board meetings, and to look for ways that they could connect with coworkers or business associates to help support the mission. We used to call them awareness lunches, where we would even encourage board members to invite people for just an hour lunch where they would hear about the mission and take a brief tour and be gone in 1 hour. So we've really tried to get the board more involved. We've had to make phone calls just of thanks to donors, and we have, there are we have probably 18 board members right now, and maybe 6 or 7 have really shown an interest and a desire to meet with donors and to make phone calls and things like that, or visits. So we encourage that. And I don't know that we're any more or less successful than other rescue missions and board members being fundraisers, but we have some really excellent ones that really take that seriously. What was the other part of your question, Andrew?
It was just what other roles does it play besides fundraising, and just in general, how does it help advance your mission? I've heard many times, a good board can make such a big difference. So, one obvious one is in fundraising, and a bad board can also make a big difference. So, but it's, what other ways does it help advance your mission besides fundraising?
Yeah, I feel like we've always had a very good board. I remember when I first took over from Morris Vanderberg in '92, that I ordered a subscription to what was then called Board and Administrator. And it was very, very helpful. It's no longer published, but it was a monthly publication that even had a section to give to board members to read. And just, it was excellent. And so that helped me initially learn a lot about how to be, I'm not a board member, but how to lead a board and give direction to a board. So we've always had just a very good board, I feel like, and very few issues that have come up over the years, and just an openness to talk and to resolve issues. It's not a rubber stamp kind of board. They do get into some pretty heavy discussions at times, but it always ends in a good way. So they've helped a lot in the development area in other ways other than fundraising, but also, just very much involved in the financial side of the mission, making sure that our budget is a safe budget and a good budget. And thankfully, over the years, they've always come back and said, hey, this is an excellent budget. You've always come close to what you projected in revenue and expenses. And so just a lot of wisdom that they give to the staff and the executive director in particular. And that's just, we have a good reputation in the community. And a lot of that is because of our board and just the influence that they have. And they've come to our rescue a number of times when things have been, when we've had difficult issues that have come up.
What did that look like? Did they speak publicly for you all, or what did they do?
In a limited way, they did.
Yeah.
In 2014, we went through a tough time over the same-sex marriage issue, and Kansas City, the Kansas City Star made such a huge issue of it. We had all the television stations, radio stations, even across the country, that were kind of attacking the mission for taking a stand. And our stand was simply we wouldn't allow a same-sex couple to stay in the same bedroom together.
Right. Yeah.
And so the board really came to the rescue in a lot of ways and stood firm along with me and the rest of our staff. And we had a food warehouse issue a few years ago too that was really tough. And again, the board stepped forward and took ownership for parts of what was going on, but also just stood strong for defending the mission as well.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's helpful. So tell me more about your board structure. So you said you have about 18 board members. What committees do you have, and what are the most active committees?
Yeah, we have a property committee. And they're very active these days because we were given a school building down near our camp in Warsaw, Missouri. We had given the property quite a few years ago to the school district there, and with the stipulation that if they ever stopped being a school or having school there, the property would come back to the mission. So it's an excellent building, but lots of decisions have to be made on what we're doing with this building because it's automatically an expense, and so they have to be working on that. We have a finance committee that is very active, and part of that committee is an audit committee. We have an annual audit, and that committee, selects the auditor and then reviews our budget and goes through all of those things. We have a membership committee that kind of monitors both the executive director as well as works with new prospective board members and applications and interviews and tours and things like that. A public relations committee that's the one that works more with the development team and making contacts with donors and things like that. We have a trust committee that we were blessed a number of years ago with a board member who said, hey, instead of spending all of the money that comes in through estates and wills and just using it as part of the general fund, let's set that aside as a special trust fund for when the mission struggles. And for years, during the summer when giving is low, the mission would often have to borrow from that internal trust fund. And that was very helpful. And that trust fund has built over the years. And so we have a committee that oversees that. The building that I'm in right now is one that was purchased for the most part through that trust fund. And so we don't hide the fact that we have this trust fund. We are very open about it. And that's just been a very helpful committee to oversee that and oversee how we just lost the word, how we monitor, can't think of the word.
Monitor that. Yeah.
Just to make sure that the funds are in the right place to raise more funds. So.
Yeah. Okay. And do you have an executive committee or?
Yes. I'm sorry. We do have an executive committee, and they meet monthly, which is a very good thing. That hasn't always been the case, but we've really pushed for that. And because we're part of the Evangelical Council for Financial Accountability, that's something that they encourage too, or strongly encourage and advise, is to have an executive committee that meets regularly before a board meeting. And so we have that. And that's an excellent time for that group to meet.
And how often does your full board meet?
10 times a year. The only months that we don't are July and December.
Okay. All right. Yeah, that's helpful. So you talk some about this next question, the ideal board composition, and what are the dimensions you consider in the composition of the board as a whole. So obviously, one thing that you talked about was demographics. You're trying to have a board that, as close as possible, represents the clients you're serving, recognizing that we don't live in a perfect world and you can't always achieve that. And then you talked a little bit about functional skills. It sounds like finance and law are two aspects. Are there other functional skills or other dimensions that you're looking at in terms of the board composition?
Well, and Andrew, there's a vacuum cleaner going on close to me now.
Okay.
I've got my door closed, but if it gets too loud, you tell me and I'll step out and have them stop.
Yeah, no, I think it's okay.
Okay. So I'm trying to now think of what you just asked about.
So the board composition, what are the functional skills beyond lawyer and accounting that you're looking for? And are there other dimensions that you're looking for in terms of like the board as a whole, to have a healthy, balanced board? All the, if you're a sports team, or all that, you have someone in all the positions, right? So, legal, accounting, what other positions you're looking for? The demographics.
And so the accounting side is one of them. We've also had over the years somebody that's been involved in real estate, just to give counsel as far as some of the properties that we both have, or there are times that people want to give us houses or other businesses, and so that committee or having a board member with some of that expertise really helps make wise decisions. So I'm trying to think. Other than that, we've had CEOs of businesses just with a lot of business experience and financial experience, and those roles have been very helpful to us. But
Yeah.
yeah, as far as specific vocations, it's been more kind of like we've had some from the financial side of things, as well
Yeah.
as the attorneys, and then just general business experience.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm curious about something you said earlier that you, and I don't know whether this was entirely from the business community or primarily from the business community rather than pastors, that you seek people. Now, is it entirely from the business community? Like you don't do pastors on your board?
Correct. We really don't,
And why is that?
well, it's a tradition. So
It was probably some good reason before your time. I mean, my guess is some of it would be within a city. If you get one pastor, then all of a sudden they may say, oh, you're going to be, I mean, you guys work really hard to be non-denominational. So if you had a prominent Baptist pastor or a prominent Pentecostal pastor on your board, they that may be a challenge, right? So is that a part of it?
yeah, I think that's part of it too, and just the fact that we're kind of interdenominational.
Yeah.
We have supporters. Thankfully, the vast majority are believers, but we have a lot of other supporters too. And so, yeah, we would have to have a pastor from every denomination and
Right.
beyond, probably. So
Yeah. And I've, I think this was kind of built into some of the other questions, but you guys only allow, Christians on your board, and it sounds like you're looking for people who are born again, and generally evangelical. Is that accurate?
yeah, it is. We've talked about having. We have kind of an advisory council that isn't an actual board,
Yeah.
but we've had other groups of people that with expertise who are just from the community that aren't believers. So, and kind of, I learned that from local Salvation Army people that they have similar
Right.
types of
Yeah.
groups. And so, there's so much expertise that is beyond
Right.
just the Christian
Oh
world.
yeah.
That,
Yeah.
yeah. But as far as the actual decision makers, we
Right.
really want them to be believers and yeah, with a strong.
Yeah, and I've seen enough rescue missions to understand why, because I mean, we've worked with over 100 rescue missions, and some of those that we worked with, they brought in non-Christians onto their board, and then pretty soon they became the majority, and then pretty soon they decided that they, got some big government grant that would double their budget if they secularized, and then next thing you know, they were the YMCA, like the YMCA, and Christians, evangelical Christians weren't, and they ousted the CEO. I know of two separate cases where they ousted the executive director because they wanted to secularize, and so there's significant risk with that. So so tell me what your board meetings look like, and what makes for an effective board meeting.
Yeah, I've always been the one to put the agenda together, and I ask ahead of time. I would always ask ahead of time what things from the executive committee in particular, what needs to be brought up. We've had some really good presidents of our board who were pretty active, and they would talk to the committee heads and prior to the meeting and say, do you have anything that needs to be presented at the meeting? And so we would have things known up front rather than coming to the mission and then several people bringing up new business that wasn't on the agenda. So we've always put an agenda together and going through the committees. We've always started with a meal. Our meetings are the third Thursday of each month, except July and December at 6 o'clock. And so we start with a meal and fellowship, and that's always been such a good thing for our ministry anyway. And typically the meetings, would be done by 8 or 8:30. So we didn't have long meetings. They were just effective and to the point. And we tried over the years to have even a time for board member development. Having a board member present something from. We've got some excellent publications. You mentioned some board books, and we've always had some of those. Dan Busby with ECFA has written some of those, and so we've used some of those to do some board training and things like that. So we primarily, start with a meal, have someone from the board read our mission statement, and we pray, and then we go through the committees and finances and then any new business, old business, and I give a report. I would give a report at the end of the meeting and do a closing prayer.
Thank you. Yeah, that's really helpful. I really like the idea of starting with a meal, and that goes along with kind of your family culture of let's just get together and have a meal together, and I mean that's how Jesus did it too, right? So breaking bread. So now, how much time did board development take, in a given month for you? And what was your role beyond preparing the agenda? It sounds like you mentioned also interviewing potential new board members. But yeah, tell me how much time it took and what your role was.
Yeah, I spent a lot of time working with the board and the executive committee, and I was involved not as a voting member on the board or on committees, but I would be involved in all the meetings and things like that. And generally, over the committees, there would be a chair of that committee that they would be responsible to take their own minutes and things like that. But I did a lot of the communication by email for the whole board. Again, we've had various presidents that have done a really good job of that, and others who just that wasn't their expertise, and they gave me that role to play. So I've done a lot of that, but yeah, the board has always been involved in the board interviews too. So it's not by any means me. I set the times up and bring the people together, but then the board actually does the interview of the prospective board member and things like that. Trying to think of other things that I've done related.
So in a given month, are you talking like 5 or 10 hours you spend for board development? I mean, obviously your meeting is going to be about 2 or 3 hours each month.
Yeah, so probably that's a safe area, 5 to 10 hours.
Okay.
Month, right?
Yeah. All right. So the next question is, why do you think most of your board members serve? What motivates them, and how are they served in the process?
Yeah, and I guess I forgot one of the key pieces to our board meetings. We would always have a client interview, a client share his testimony, and so that's always been one of the highlights of every board meeting is when we bring either a female or a family or a husband and wife, sometimes the kids, or one of the men from our long-term programs, and they would share their testimony. And that board members, when they're recruiting other board members, that's one of the things that they share with people that they're recruiting is we get to hear firsthand from the testimony of someone whose life was changed at the mission. So that's. Well, I'm forgetting the specific question. I wander too much.
Yeah, that's right. Well, I'm glad you added that. That's actually the best idea you had on your board meeting. The meals and the client interview is great. So why? So you're getting to the first question. Why do you think most of the board members serve? They see they're changing lives. you bring in the client interview. So that basically, I think what you're saying is the client interview helps remind them how their work is changing lives, right?
Yeah.
But tell me more, of that, and how do you foster that feeling in knowledge? It's one thing to have in your head that you're changing lives. It's another thing to go have a monthly meal, have someone tell a story that leaves you almost in tears. That keeps you motivated, right?
Yeah.
So yeah. Tell me more. How do you foster that, motivation and um, yeah, and the reasons they serve? And there may be others that serve
Yeah.
for reasons, right?
Well, I think, again, we've had some new board members who really didn't know a lot about the mission, and they were recruited by, either sometimes a pastor would say, hey, this person is in business. They don't know a lot about the mission, but they're very interested. And, but for the most part, our board members have been supporters of the mission. So, they have that motivation already that prompts them to give. But, I think it's just because of the changed lives. I was talking to a major donor just this morning, and he just reemphasized the reason that they support the mission in such a substantial way is because of the people we impact every day. And I think that's the motivation for a lot of our board members, that they just love being able to see um, real changes in people, and real service being done in the name of Jesus, for those struggling with drug addiction or alcohol addiction or abuse or mental illness or physical handicaps. And so I think that's just motivation enough that people love to care for other people, and that's true of our board members.
Yeah. So you have clients come in at each board meeting. Are there other touch points? Like, do you try to get board members come serve soup, in your soup kitchen, or other things? Like, what other touch points do you do? Like, it sounds like you give a tour initially, and then you have the clients come in and give their testimony. Are there any other touch points that you do that helps them understand the hands-on work?
Yeah, we have for the last several years. There's always been various ways that we've tried. We've done some of the meals where board members would come and do meals. I tried, and I probably didn't try hard enough to even have a board do a chapel service periodically, things like that. So because I still do a chapel service because I want people to know who I am, that I'm not just sitting in an office, but that I really care about them. And, that's would have been nice for board members to come across like that
Yeah.
too. That we've had individual board members or with their churches come to serve meals. Also, we have classes that we ask board members to teach of our long-term program for men. And that's been a really popular thing where they get to come in. Some of them are scared to death. They think, how can I, as this successful business person, um, how can I come across appropriately and
Yeah.
in a positive way to clients of the mission? And they
Right.
come in
Yeah.
and they discover real quickly that these guys or gals are just, they just have questions. They have an intense interest in hearing about the Lord. And, and it's not just Bible classes. We have board members come in to share from their own expertise, their business background,
Yeah.
and things like that. So that's been the most probably active way board members have been involved apart from board meetings.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's great, man. Makes me want to be a board member, even though I'm not in the same city. So,
Yeah.
but all right. So tell me how you orient your new board members. Um, and yeah.
Yeah, we have an orientation worksheet that we try to go through, and that's again had various levels of success. There are some board members who really say, "Hey, that's exactly what I want to do," and lead a tour and mentor a new board member. And so that still goes on, but the initial orientation is just trying to get everyone to come to take a tour of all of our facilities. And the current board president has been working really hard at that with all the board members, getting them to come to all of our facilities, just that they haven't been at for sometimes a long time. And new members, maybe, we try to get new board members to visit all of the facilities, but that doesn't always happen because of their time. Something comes up.
Mhm.
So that's part of it, though, giving tours so people will know. One thing of one of the board members, his story is pretty unique. He and his wife initially wanted to just come and talk because they were supportive of the mission, and the husband was interested in becoming a board member, but he just wanted to learn more. So he's just been very good at some of the orientation times as well. He served as our board president at times, but he's strong on saying to new board members, hey, it's going to take a few years for you to get to know everything. So come to as much as you can possibly come to, and make sure you see all the facilities.
Yeah.
But mentoring is an important piece too, especially for people who have not been a board member of a Christian organization in the past. Some have been board members of their church, elders or deacons. So it's been important for another board member to kind of walk somebody through the whole process. So that's primarily it, is going through all the materials. I send our board materials out, the bylaws, and I actually, after stepping down from leadership, I finished a board manual that I presented to the board now, so they have a multi-page manual online that they can see just about everything they need to about mission and about serving as a board member. So that's part of orientation as well.
Okay. Tell me a little more about how the mentoring works. What does one board member do to mentor another board member?
Yeah, they would just encourage a potential or a new board member to actually sit down with them and talk through things. And even our interview process, there's even a lot of mentoring that goes on in that hour-long interview process of just a lot of overview of the mission and nothing overwhelming, just kind of answering the person's questions, and they're always coming back with, well, I had no idea. But again, it hasn't been always a successful program. I think all of our board members, though, would say, even the new ones, and we had, I think, 3 or 4 new ones last year, and some of them were very familiar with the mission. They had been volunteers in some way at our camp or somewhere else. And so the mentoring probably isn't the primary way of orientation. It has some impact at some level. It can definitely improve, and the new director will probably grow and improve a lot of the things that I did myself. So that may be one of the areas.
Yeah, that's great. Well, so you're executive director, I think you said, for 28 years. Is that right?
Yeah.
So what were the key steps that you've made during your time as executive director to improve your board overall?
Yeah, again, Morris Vanderberg, my predecessor, who had been here for 40 years, and his wife's parents are the ones that started the mission back in 1924. And so he brought me into meetings early on, before I actually became the director. So I got to know some of the board members early on. But boy, when Morris left and the first board meeting I had, I was winging it in a lot of ways, which is probably pretty normal too. But that's why I really appreciated this publication, Board and Administrator. And it was specifically for not-for-profits, and just a lot of really good material that I would put into practice right away. Morris Vanderberg had developed a whole lot of stuff, and every time somebody new comes, they're developing new things, and so I did a lot of that, and most everything I did was board related. just trying to improve board meetings, make them more efficient. And this manual and other books, and Dan Busby was, before he became the head of ECFA, now he's stepped down from that, but he was our auditor here in Kansas City for quite a few years.
Okay.
And so he was always helpful. He's a good friend. And so he helped in a lot of ways. He's come and spoken to our board, and we've had the head of, used to be the International Union of Gospel Missions, and then it was the Association of Gospel Rescue Missions, and now it's Citygate Network. And so we've had the head of that, Steve Berger, and John Ashton come and share with our board as well. So just trying to improve and encourage our board to get more involved and to run a more efficient meeting and just have better oversight of this ministry.
Yeah, so it sounds like the key thing is just continual learning, like you learned yourself, you ensured your board was learning, and then in that the board overall improves. Well, kind of related to that, and City Vision's only been around, so I've been the executive, or I guess the president of City Vision for I guess it's 2008, so 12 years. So it's really only had a board for 12 years. And, a lot of our students, about half our students are with ministries that have been around for maybe, 20 years or less, right? So what advice would you have for earlier stage ministries wanting to advance the maturity and effectiveness of their board?
Well, probably taking courses through your ministry is an important way. I've tried to find other replacements for this board and administrator that was just so helpful, and have never come up with anything. There was another one for a brief time. I don't remember what it was, but it wasn't as good as board and administrator. And so, that's learning. ECFA, Evangelical Council for Financial Accountability, they have so much helpful material on boards and building boards. And Dan Busby has written a number of books with others, and just a lot of other materials. That's what I based our board member manual on, was some things that ECFA had put together. And so I would just encourage people to definitely connect with you and learn from the various classes you have online, but also things through ECFA, and there are probably other places as well. But I just have high respect for you and for ECFA as well.
Yeah, thank you. Well, the last question I have is, for other ministries that you're familiar with, what do you see as the most common mistakes made with their boards?
Yeah, Steve Berger, who was the head of the Association of Gospel Rescue Missions for quite a few years, he was always very good at, and a lot of rescue missions would ask him to come and train their board. And yeah, I know of a number of places that just the board needs so much help as far as how to lead a not-for-profit, and especially a Christian organization. And again, I'm probably not remembering specifically the question you have.
Well, the mistakes. So what are the mistakes?
Well,
A lot of what I've had you do is the positives. Okay, here's what you should be doing. What are things where you've seen boards wreck an organization, to be honest, or not do their job,
and that's, I guess, where I was heading, is that there are rescue missions that I'm familiar with who have boards that just really do not know how to lead, and they've made mistakes of running. The executive director is supposed to be their only staff member. They're the only person that they're responsible for, and all of the other staff members of a rescue mission or an organization in a not-for-profit should be under the CEO or the executive director. And so I've known at least two, maybe three other rescue missions where board has usurped the authority in a lot of ways of the executive director, and they're responsible, or they take the responsibility of hiring and firing and doing things that the executive director is supposed to be doing. And, you know, there have been others that, as you were saying earlier, that a board member comes onto the board of a ministry who isn't either a strong believer or isn't a believer at all, but just had some really expertise that would help that ministry, and they brought in other unbelievers. And, you know, one rescue mission in particular that I know has struggled with that. You know, they've become more a secular board. The ministry is still trying to adhere to Christian principles and sharing the gospel, but a board that really doesn't have the same mindset can really destroy ultimately, or turn a Christian organization into a secular organization. So those are some of the things that I think have been problems that people you need to be aware of. And if you have a strong Christian ministry, you want strong Christians to be part of that and heading it up, as well as your staff.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that, you know, any organization, any company, you know, Apple is going to get board members that are aligned with their values. They're not going to get board members that aren't aligned with their values. And, but having said that, they might work with consultants or other people, and, you know, their employees are going to be aligned with their values. They might work with consultants that aren't fully in line with their values. And I think that, you know, like you said, the Salvation Army's model of using advisory boards, which, you know, you use, like if someone wants to help, man, who wants, you know, you should never necessarily turn them away if they're, you know, genuinely going to help. But at the same time, you don't give them the keys to your car to tell you where you're going to drive, right? Yeah. So, and to a certain extent, that's what you're doing with your board. So, Dan, this has been extremely helpful. I have really appreciated your wisdom and your experience in this, and I think that there's a lot of other organizations that can learn from your experience. I got a lot of ideas. There's, you know, several things I want to follow up with you after this, and thank you for sharing your experience with our students. So I really
thank you, Andrew.
Okay.
Very much.
Okay, thanks.